Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a really fascinating puzzle at the heart of modern France. It's this paradox of a nation that has one of the most generous welfare states in the world, side by side with an education system that's still incredibly elitist. So, how can that be? Let's dive in.
So, how do we even begin to unpack this? Well, to help us out, we're going to lean on the work of political scientist Dr. John S. Ambler. He gives us this amazing framework for understanding how these two things, huge social support and an elite education system, don't just exist together in France, but actually kind of prop each other up.
To really get a handle on how this system works today, we've got to go back in time. We need to look at the foundations, because the French education system wasn't built on just one idea, but on this complex mix of powerful and sometimes clashing historical forces. It really boils down to three core pillars that kind of formed the system's DNA. First, you have classical liberalism, which was all about equality of opportunity. The idea of a fair start so the best and brightest could rise. Then there's social Catholicism, which brought in this long-standing tradition of the church's role in social care. And finally, you've got Republican state building. For the leaders of the new republic, schools were an essential tool for creating a single, unified nation of loyal citizens. And you can literally see this ideology playing out over time. There was this series of huge reforms aimed at making education more democratic. Things like the creation of the college unique, a single common middle school for every student, and making kids stay in school longer. The big goal here? Give more kids more schooling and try to break down some of those old class barriers, at least on paper.
But here's the thing, expanding access is only one piece of the puzzle. To really grasp the paradox, we need to understand the very unique way the French state actually works, especially when you put it next to a system like the one in the United States.
Okay, this is a really crucial difference. In the US, you've got what's called a pluralist model. It's kind of like a free-for-all, where all these different interest groups are competing for influence. But France operates on a corporatist model. The state isn't just a referee, it's an active organizer. It brings key groups like teachers' unions and parent groups right to the table, gives them funding, and makes them a formal part of how policy gets made. And this data, it perfectly illustrates what that looks like in practice. Just look at the difference. French education groups are way smaller and have much, much less money than their American counterparts. Why? Well, they don't need to be these giant fundraising machines because the state itself supports them. This creates this really close, almost dependent relationship, which keeps the whole conversation centralized and managed from the top down. So you've got this powerful central state managing this massive, expanding education system. What's the actual output of this whole system? What does this meritocracy machine really produce in the real world? Well, on one hand, the results were just spectacular. The system achieved what's called a massification of education. By the late 1980s, a whopping 87% of 17-year-olds were still in school. I mean, that is a dramatic, transformative shift from just a generation or two before. Millions more people were getting an education. But, and this is a big but, here's where that paradox really sinks its teeth in. While the total number of students exploded, real equality was still pretty far off. Sure, the percentage of university students from working-class families went up, but it was still incredibly low. The promise of equal opportunity, yeah, it was hitting a very real ceiling. So why the gap? Well, sociologist Raymond Boudon had a really interesting take on this. He said it comes down to rational choices that are shaped by your social background. For a working-class kid, getting a 2-year technical degree is a huge achievement, a clear success. But for the child of a doctor or a lawyer, anything short of a full university degree might feel like you failed the family. These different ideas of what success even looks like quietly keep the social order in place. And then you have the very, very top of the pyramid. Here, the elite track is basically untouched. We're talking about the Grandes Écoles. These are hyper-selective, prestigious schools, totally separate from the regular university system that churn out the nation's leaders in government, politics, and business. And get this, even when the Socialist Party was in power and wanted to reform them, this elite pipeline proved to be just too powerful to change. Which brings us to the final and maybe most important question. If the system has these obvious inequalities baked into it, how on earth does it survive? Why haven't governments, especially left-leaning ones, been able to fundamentally change it? Well, the simple answer is that despite all its flaws, the French people are fundamentally attached to their welfare state. The system isn't just seen as some kind of safety net for the poor, it's seen as a core benefit of being a French citizen. It provides security for everybody. And check this out, this poll from 1983 is just mind-blowing. When they were asked about their rights, the French public said that Social Security was even more fundamental to them than the right to vote. I mean, wow. When you have that kind of overwhelming public support, no politician is going to risk trying to tear down the system. And that right there is the heart of Dr. Ambler's conclusion. The French welfare state survives because its benefits don't just go to the poor, they go to everyone. The middle class, the upper middle class, they also get subsidized healthcare, great pensions, and almost free higher education. This creates this huge, broad base of support that protects the whole system from any radical change, even if that means keeping the elite educational tracks right alongside it. So we're left with this really powerful question. The French case shows us that a strong, centralized state can do amazing things, like massively expand access to education and welfare. But it also suggests that that same powerful state can end up protecting and even justifying a system that reproduces elites, generation after generation. It's a paradox, and it's one that pretty much every modern democracy is still trying to figure out.